Right, so, and then I think I either got banned or the technology locked me out, and then of course the all.com happened, and then all those kids went over there, and you know, sorry, right?
You know, the all commenters have now moved on to the hairpin.
Have they? And then move on to something else. But it's actually a lot of the same people from that time. But we did have a feeling that we were part of that kind of enlightened conversation. Like we all kind of knew who each other were. We went to these drinking events, and it seems like when everybody moved over to the all, there was this kind of idea like, oh, well, you know, Gawker is now, you know, we're cooler now or something like that. I mean, it's all kind of bullshit, right? But, so I don't know, I think it's sad in the way that you think that it never happened, because it did, around your side, I believe. Like, maybe it's very small, maybe a small subsection of the topic.
It was awesome, and frankly, the comments I'm dissatisfied by the comments on our sites, but they're still way better than on most sites of competing scale. But the fact is that Gawker is now probably has 5 times the audience that it did back in the day when, you know, the halcyon age of Corey Seeker. And one of the things that's evident online is that there's a scale problem. That what you can manage on a small site like a Boing Boing Gadgets or, you know, maybe some of the deeper recesses of Chowhound, the kind of level of discussion that you can actually have on those is not the level of discussion that is possible to have on a big newspaper site or on one of our larger sites. And, you know, a smaller site now has 2 million uniques. That's small for us. And it's very hard to maintain the same intimacy that you had in the early days, and that's the challenge that we're addressing.
So it's a really interesting example. We were talking earlier about Boing Boing Gadgets was an example we went to, kind of obscure example, but Joel Johnson had been an editor of it, and early on had done a conversation asking about the early days of Wire. Talk a little bit about why that post and that thread were interesting.
I'm obsessed by this particular post, which I can't remember what the headline is. But it was a post that was 400 words or so, and it triggered, I guess because Joel had been involved with Wired himself, and so he had some natural authority. But it drew in every single person who'd been involved in the history of Wired. From Chris Anderson on that.
Current editors, former editors, publishers, everything.
It was a complete oral history. It was one of those examples where the comments were so much better than the original post was fine, but it was a historical document that had been assembled at the cost of 400 word post, which sounds like the best editorial model you can possibly imagine.
How many of you saw the branch conversation that had gone on prior to this panel? I know a few of you had tweeted.
Yeah, Branch was fascinating.
So Branch is a startup that does roundtables with invited participants, and I'd asked former Gawker editors, peers, and competitors in the engineering community to weigh in. And though the conversation was very important, there were actually some very interesting things that came out of it in a closed commenting community by having a half dozen people who were allowed to comment. Now you've said one of these problems is scale, kind of your conversation. Is Gawker going to start to do invited commenters that, you know, these are the 5 people who can comment on this post?
Yes.
How are you going to do it?
I think it's part of the answer. We should probably back up a little bit.
Sure.
What we have is, in comments, is what economists would call the tragedy of the commons, or we should call it the tragedy of the commons. The idea that without fences, without any delineated rights and responsibilities, that the discussion area gets overtaken, and the larger the size, more it will get overtaken, overused. No one really feels ownership, particularly as you get lots of participants, and the quality of the environment deteriorates to the point at which it becomes a complete wasteland. And that's been the story of online discussion environments since before blogs.
So you need to have constraints in order to have good comments.
I think you need to have responsibility. You need to have responsibility being allocated. And the Branch is a good example of responsibility being allocated. You were responsible.
Right.
Yeah? You were responsible for choosing the participants. It was public, but the membership was limited. And you invited people, they were participating under their own names. So I think that is a significant part of the answer of building fences around particular discussion areas. And the core of the Gawker idea, the system that we're building, that we're launching, will be on launch on Gawker.com in about 6 weeks' time, is the idea that everybody owns the thread that they start. Everybody owns the discussions that they trigger.
So even if you're not a Gawker editor, not a Gawker employee, you can own a comment thread within a post and say, I'm going to curate how this conversation goes.
Exactly. Think about what I want. What I want is I want the sources, I want the experts, the authorities to be able to comment in discussion. I don't want it to be, even if the Gawker commenting clique of 2006 was a pretty high-class commenting clique, it was still a commenting clique. It was still off-putting to outsiders. It was hard to induce sources to come in and to make their points, to rebut. I'd say to people, don't call me, don't IM me, don't email me. Go in the comments and say your piece.
So people right now, sources, people who are newsmakers, call you.
Or Brian Williams would send me an email.
Right.
Or Dov Charney from America Apparel, in response to coverage of the sexual harassment cases against him on Jezebel, would call up and, frankly, waste a lot of editorial time calling up and complaining about the coverage.
But Dov Charney is never going to go into your comments, is he?
Well, right now, there's no way to go to comments, because if Dov Charney went into the Jezebel comments, he would be literally torn limb from limb. It wouldn't just be his limbs that would be torn.
That's right. That's right. No, but take Brian Williams.
But what if we could actually, maybe Dov Charney is the extreme case.
Right.
If we can provide security for Dov Charney to say his piece, then we would have cracked the problem of time. But a lot of people, I don't like going into the comments, because for every 2 comments that are actually interesting, even if critical, they're interesting and you want to engage with them, there'll be 8 that will be off topic or just toxic, and I want to be able to deal with, as a commenter, I want to be able to deal with the intelligent critics and not with everybody.
So, and we'll get to the questions in just a moment. When I had, about 6 months ago, I wrote a blog post that your websites will last since your fall. And this is actually one of the things that kind of kicked off you and I re-engaging around this topic, which is there's a personal responsibility piece, because if people are being that snarky, that cutting, that negative to each other, isn't it because of the tone of the site, or because you haven't moderated that behavior in the past?
I mean, it's certainly true that nice sites run by nice people, particularly if they're nice and firm, as Adam Nash at Lifehacker and Emily Newitz at Iovana, that encourages good behavior. But it's a feedback mechanism. It's not as if it's simply the writer setting the tone for comments. The comments also set the tone for the writer. That there are stories that I know that we would run on our sites, earnest stories that our writers are afraid to write, because those are the ones that are most vulnerable to jeers from the commenters.
And how much of this is advertising? Do you want nicer comments because it's a business consideration?
We want to have nicer comments because we want to have better sites, and the effect of that commercially is that if you have better sites, then they grow and you get more advertising.
So only indirect. But and then similarly, how much of the desire of the commenters to be negative is speaking truth to power, right? Your editors are frequently Ivy League educated, they live in New York City, they've got health care, right? They're much better off than most of your commenters are. So shouldn't your commenters be attacking?
Well, some of our commenters have actually become editors. Ryan Tate was a commenter. Richard Lawson was a commenter. If we can soften the sometimes antagonistic relationship between writers and commenters that exists both within some of our sites, but also more generally on the web. No newspaper journalist likes their commenters. If we can actually soften that divide, then maybe we'll make it easier for us to hire people like Ryan Tate, and it becomes more of a talent.
But should you soften it? I mean, for the same reason that you need to attack the institutions you attack, shouldn't you be?
I think we do want to soften it because we want to give more responsibility to people. So we want to push responsibility down. Right now, who has responsibility for the quality of the discussions? Sometimes the site lead, can they read all the comments and all the posts? The writer of the piece has to move on to the next piece. They don't have time to moderate all those comments. a moderator is probably not going to be specifically an expert in that topic, and they're not going to have contacts with the sources, therefore they're not going to be able to bring those people in. But right now, there's nobody to take responsibility. What we want to do is give everybody responsibility over the threads that they start.
And that's not just purely to farm it out so that you don't have to pay for moderators?
No, it's in order to share responsibility, to share ownership, and so that if somebody gets, our system is going to involve people being able to having an inbox of replies to their comments, and they will be able to accept or dismiss, to engage or not to engage with the comments they want to deal with. To dismiss a comment would not be to delete it, but it will be to split the conversation. So it's basically saying, you know what, have that conversation, but have it in another room. This is my room. Just as branch, that was your room, that was your conversation. So we want to create that sense of ownership and separation so people can have civilized and critical, and sometimes they can disagree with each other, but at least they should do it interesting.
That's a good question.
Roughly in that area, we talk about getting the reader confidence, and we talk about the tragedy of confidence. So we talk about.
Did you like that phrase, by the way? Tragedy of confidence.
He's very proud of that.
I'm trying to touch on tragedy of confidence.
I like it. So what opportunities or constraints are there in pure escalation? So you're choosing to give the owner of the original thread or post the moderator role. Why isn't there a way to crowdsource the discussion? So like a pure escalation of comments, so the readership is judging what content goes on, or the we constraint is going on versus the way that you're going with the original writer and thread or owner of the
Yeah. You're thinking more about kind of like a Reddit kind of upvoting, downvoting system. Some of the most, this is where we diverge, I think, from the internet mainstream, which is that we don't really believe in this democratic process of decision-making when it comes to discussion. Dov Charney, I want to hear from Dov Charney, but he'll go in. And if you put it to a vote, 90% of people on Jezebel would vote to ban him.
They hate that guy.
They hate that guy. 80% of them would probably lynch him. You can't afford to, if you want to have interesting opinions, interesting dissenting opinions, you can't afford to put it to the vote.
So on the basis of personal control, I just wanted to get your opinion on because we just had this one, and how you feel about Facebook.
What's your sense?
Facebook commenting and how you feel about that. And I know obviously Reddit's a different platform to comment and it also includes a personal control.
Facebook comments are very interesting, and obviously a lot of sites have, given in despair of their own commenting systems, they have put themselves in Facebook's hands. I think TechCrunch's move to do that has made for more polite comments, but much less interesting comments. And my own view is that anonymity is at the heart of the internet and discovery of truth through the internet. And since the early days of the internet, you had misfit teens finding each other in the Midwest because they were anonymous. They could actually be themselves. Anonymity has been critical for self-discovery. It's been critical for people within organizations to expose the truth about those organizations. And for an organization like ours that is trying in our own fucked up way to get to the truth, we have to have anonymity as one of our tools, and therefore anonymity has to be baked into our commenting system. And the Facebook answer may be an answer for some people, but it can't be an answer for us.
So there's also an interesting balance of anonymity leaves you with a problem, right? If you do a thread on Lana Del Rey and somebody says worst performance ever, and it doesn't say violent, then who cares, right? That comment's not worthwhile about it.
Have you never seen a comment that was anonymous, but where the authority it just reeked of authority? You thought, okay, this person absolutely knows.
Sure. I used to work at that company, and here's what I know about it.
And if there are a couple of facts mentioned in a post that you could correlate with your own view, you'll ascribe a certain amount of credibility to that comment. And those are actually the most interesting comments. This is why most systems that have been developed, including our own, were so broken. Because the most interesting comments, they don't come from people with cloud schools. They don't come from people who actually have a long history of commenting on our sites or any sites. Often it's a first timer, often it's anonymous. Sometimes they're moved by, they're so outraged by what we just wrote that they want to set the record straight. Those are the most valuable comments of all, and no system that is currently in existence actually allows those comments to rise to the top.
So our mutual acquaintance, John Peretti, first when he was at HuffPo, now at BuzzFeed, has been very strongly advocating around the social connection comments, that looking in Twitter, looking in Facebook is this essential part of what you do. So separate from identity, how important are Facebook and Twitter generally for driving traffic on the sites, having a social component as part of commenting, and how important are they just actually relative to one another, which networks do you care about?
A little sidetrack here, but I think Jonah's approach is interesting. It was very interesting how it's another school of thought because they are entirely volume focused. The purpose of comments is not to develop a story. It's not to expose the truth. The purpose of comments is simply to allow readers to feel like participants. Even if they're not really participants, it's to allow them to express themselves. And we don't care about the volume of comments. I could quite happily publish half as many comments if they were twice as interesting. And that would be a trade-off that we would make.
So you're not driving pure engagement in that level. Ted, any questions?
Nick, I'm really excited about this. I think your strategy is going to be really successful and adding responsibilities to commenters. I think Verge is doing a little bit. But I would love to hear about what strategies you've tried before to bring responsibility to commenters, like in the verbiage. I notice you use contribute versus, and have there things that have failed and not worked as well?
I think we and everybody else made a huge wrong turning in the gamification of comments. What we did initially was we had an approval process. So you had to go through some vetting before you be approved, and then you could comment. And then we introduced another layer to the hierarchy. We a VIP star system, so we gave people stars, and those stars had some extra powers. They could approve comments from new commenters. Their contributions were more heavily weighted. The public process of starring and banning has been way too drama-driven. And to realize
It stresses the editors out.
it stresses everybody out. And the realization I've come to is that if you're trying to encourage really good contributions, people who want to make really good contributions, or people who are motivated to contradict you in an article, they do not care about badges. The people who care about badges are the people who they need some psychological benefit they're getting to the badges. They're not necessarily the people who are going to contribute the most information. It's kind of insulting. We're going to give you a star if you wrote something smart. If you wrote something smart, we should publish it, and we should publish it prominently. That's the reward that you need, not a badge like you're in high school.
Well, that actually sounds like you're optimizing for not repeat visitors who are super engaged, but you're optimizing for somebody who might less frequently comment, but have that really, really detailed feedback. Is there any site that does that well today?
I don't think so.
And your willingness to experiment.
I wouldn't say necessarily optimized for that, but certainly those people, pretty much everyone in this room, I'm assuming, is savvy. Like they know how comment environments or discussion environments generally work. It's a really intimidating environment for most people. And if you actually want to it's intimidating technically. Often it's actually harder to sign up than you think. And it's intimidating because it feels like you're entering into a world in which everybody knows each other. They have a certain language, and most people either they can't be bothered, or they don't want to, or they're turned off by it.
So you think the commentary kind of culture to be too insular?
Massively. I don't think anyone would really disagree at this point.
The willingness to experiment here is very interesting. So you've done, like broadly at sites, if we look at Defamer and Wonket, consumers, they didn't necessarily work out that much, at least not in the business for you.
Yeah,
we've all lived on them.
Of 18 sites that we've launched, disposal of mine.
Right. But I mean, like Fleshbot, right? Like you have a porn site that didn't
No,
work as a business.
We've spun that out.
Right. So that's interesting, right? It didn't work as part of the core.
No, it worked as a core business, it just didn't work as a corporate media business.
Okay. So, and then of course the redesign was a very big experiment, right? Which was, even though you covered.
We're a private company.
So do you want to keep experimenting on that level? Do you think your comments experiment is going to be as radical an experiment as this?
You know, one of the things I think is a little bit sad on the web right now is that people don't experiment. And they don't experiment partly because they've had venture funding and they've got, there's people have a board to watch out for, and investors are actually often the most conventional thinkers around, and they want you to be consistent with whatever buzzword they've heard 3 months ago. I think Twitter and internet comments generally have also inhibited innovation. That what was the most absurd episode of the Gap logo? What was so bad about that Gap logo? Was it a crime?